Welcome back to the France 24 debate. Tonight we're discussing unrest across the Arab world and asking, is Algeria set to follow Tunisia and Egypt and become the scene of another revolution? Joining me to discuss tonight is Douglas Yates. He's a professor at the American University in Paris. He's here with me in the studio. In Algiers, on the line, is Amel Boubekeur. She's a research fellow at the École Normale Supérieure. She's joining us from the Algerian capital tonight. In Geneva, Mouradina is a co-founder of the Rashad movement, which is calling for change in Algeria. And in London tonight, Saad Jabbar is an international lawyer. Many thanks indeed to all of you for being with us tonight. Douglas Yates, I'll start with you. Give you a chance to respond to that point made by Mouradina before the break. He says it's wrong to say that because Algeria is not well connected on the internet, it can't organise a revolution.
First I'd like to apologize to him and also to any activist who's getting frustrated at my negative analysis. My heart's with them, and also I think choice matters a lot here. People making that courageous choice to go out and confront fear is a big deal. But there has been two arguments about when a revolution happened since the 19th century. One of those arguments, which still exists today, is the Marxian argument that you have a revolution when things are getting worse. People kind of can't take it anymore, and they rise up and overthrow their oppressors. The other argument, which was championed by Alexis de Tocqueville, was that, in fact, you have a revolution when things are getting better. It's when things are getting better, when people can eat, when they can meet their daily needs, but when things are not meeting their rising expectations, and you have a gap of rising expectations, that people who have the ability to meet their needs then organize. And what we saw in Tunisia were families with single children who were on the internet, who had college educations, who had great expectations, and who were frustrated by a highly corrupt regime. What we saw in Egypt as well is a country that's moving forward. And I'm afraid what we're seeing with Algeria is a rentier state, a state where a corrupt elite have taken a real revolution, which happened 30 years ago, and turned it into an opportunity for kleptocracy, where you've got people who are getting fat on oil revenues, who are lazy and have no vision for the future. And unfortunately, this kind of regime is hard to resist because they put the people in such desperation that they do not have the means to resist.
And on top of that, of course, Algerians are well aware that their country is very rich in natural resources. It has a lot of oil, it has a lot of gas. Mouradina, what do you say to that? What are your thoughts?
Support me.
Well, I think that was to Mr. Yates. I can just reassure him that I totally understand the analysis that he's done, and I share his the points that he raised. But I just wanted to draw his attention that sometimes we just overemphasize some factors. I'm totally aware, and I agree with the analysis that he has done. But I'm just saying that there are other means. That what we have just learned this month and the month before is that revolutions can come quicker and in an unexpected way. This is what we saw in Tunisia and in Egypt. So things will be different in Algeria. This is for sure. This is true. And they may take longer. They may come faster because of unexpected things again. But I'm sure that there's something underway that we are really at a turning point in the Algerian history, because it is the end of an era which has been maintained by big money, but now even that big money is not enough to close the mouths of the Algerians, and people just now want freedom. Yes. Big money coming from where? Could you be more specific about the big money? Well, there's big money from oil, definitely, but that is not enough, because lots of people are just claiming that Algeria has got a lot of money because it's still, maintained in the hands of a few who are, literally just stealing that money. But it's still, these are meaningless amounts for a country of the size of Algeria.
All right.
The PNB of Algeria is so low compared to neighbors and to European states who do not have oil. So I think even that argument of money is not going to stand up, because people want more, resources at disposal, want more. People want
more of a share of the country's wealth, right? Quite. Well, Saad Jabbar's in London with us tonight. Aside from all of the economic arguments and the fact that life is unfair in Algeria, what about the fact that the country has a very violent, very bloody history, and many people in Algeria, with that civil war still fresh in their minds, might actually value security, stability, certainty, a strong government over democratic freedoms?
Well, that's what the regime has been peddling and promoting in the last few days. They are saying the Algerians want their stability, and that's what they say in North Korea. That's what the Soviet Union said before. That's what the Egyptian president tried to use as an excuse. So they are saying the Algerians are frightened of another experience.
Well, it is a very divided country, isn't it?
No, that's, excuse me, you asked me a question, let me allow me to answer. I think this excuse of stability and fear of the people from another cycle of violence is being used and overused as another card by the Algerian regime to justify non-movement. What the Algerians need is good governance, accountable government. Without that, that's why you have corruption. That's why you have now the Algerian regime are selling functions. You know, you work in a commune or you work in a prefecture or whatever. You buy a position in order to make money out of it. So the privatization of the state itself in order to suppress the people. The other point is this. The case is not only against Bouteflika. Bouteflika is 1/5 of president. There are other Alibabas who are presidents behind the scenes. And thirdly, and most importantly, the Algerians, like many in the Arab world, especially the Maghreb area, which were well linked to the West, since the Roman times, Vandal times, the French times, they are living in a universal village. They know that elections take place in France, in the United States, in the UK. No one is sacrosanct. The only backward element in the Algerian society are those generals and Bouteflika themselves, who are still thinking that Algeria's history stopped after they liberated Algeria from France. But the other point is this. The Algerians have gained independence from France, but they have never gained their liberty. This is what we are talking about today, and the wall of fear has collapsed, and the sooner the Algerian regime realizes that the best outcome for their country, the best future for their country, is for them to do the decent thing like the generals in Chile, in Argentina, in Latin America, and other countries of the third world have done, and move towards or accepting the inevitable, which is democracy in our countries. Africa has done it. Look at Zambia, look at Nigeria, look at South Africa, look at Kenya, Uganda. The only people who have been stopping that train of progress are those at the top who have led resistance against the French when they are at the age of Boubekeur. The youth are the future, and the youth are living in a global village. That global village, they could see how governments are changing peacefully, how the press are speaking without fear, how the judiciary are putting presidents in prison or prime ministers are being challenged, and they see how people are setting up parties with programs and the alternate about power. The rest of it is a Taliban. We have a new Taliban in Algeria, like we had the new Taliban in Egypt, new Taliban who switch off the internet, switch off the press, stop any progressive force to move forward. So these are new Talibans.
Absolutely. Well, the big fear, of course, from the West watching these events is that there will be some kind of Islamic takeover in these countries.
So that is over. That is over. That card is sell-by date pass. That is over. Because in Tunisia, in Egypt, the whole society rose up against the regimes. Therefore, it is not one force which could claim monopoly over the truth.
That has been a big fear, though, hasn't it? Amel, what are your thoughts on that? What about that fear? Is that something that's been ramped up by the West? Is it a fear that's being used by...
That is a big lie.
Could we just get the view of my other guest? Thank you for now, Mr. Jad. Can you tell me what your thoughts are on that, Amel?
Well, I think one of the main reasons is not to have this kind of bipolar relationship that we had in the 90s between the Islamists on one side and the power on one side, but to have a new kind of bipolar relationship between the power / security forces, police, secret services, intelligence, Bouteflika, and so on, and on the other hand, the opposition. That's what is occurring now in Algeria is impulsing by a civilian movement. We should not be misled by the participation, and I think it's a good sign of various kind of political parties. But if these political parties are trying to pretend that they are on the verge of this movement, that's just false. I mean, these movements are led by young people, and I think one way to make things happen quicker and one way to answer the question of is Algeria next, it's to find a way to reconnect these demonstrations, legalized demonstrations taking place in the center of Algiers, with other more spontaneous riots that are taking place in the country, and which are not totally not framed by a political ideology, whatever ideology it could be. So that could be a way to hurry things, and that could be a way also to make people getting in identification with these demands. Because you can take the streets, but if you don't make clear to the ordinary citizens why they should participate and contribute to the march, then they won't. So that's really what is needed in order to make Algeria next on the list of Arab revolutions.
Do you think that's one thing that's keeping people home in Algeria, that's stopping them from protesting there because of that expression, better the devil you know? They're worried about what might step in to the shoes of the Bouteflika government if he's brought down?
Well, it is a divided society, and obviously there's a great number of people who do see themselves in the regime, and more importantly, the 31% of the population that's young, which is the population would be counting on to go out into the streets, are clearly not as influenced by the Islamic Revolution of the 1970s model as perhaps by more individualist democratic movement. One great similarity between Egypt and Algeria is in both cases, the Islamic fundamentalists were going to win democratic elections. And in both cases, pro-Western autocrats preferred stability over democracy. And these blockages, even if in the name of legitimate fears, have prevented the very democratic process that's necessary to get regimes that are pro-Western.
That's a good point. One British journalist put it today, actually, in The Guardian, I think. The West supports democracy if democracy supports the West.
Tariq Ramadan from Oxford had made the same point in saying in Egypt, we probably should treat the Islamic fundamentalist democratic movements differently, keeping them in the political arena rather than driving them into Al-Qaeda of the Islamic Maghreb.
That's actually...
Go ahead, Amal.
If I may.
Yes,
if
please.
I may, that's actually Algeria may benefit from actually the fact that Algeria could be third on the list and benefit from a more clear position of the West is something that Algerians are waiting very much so. So I think that Europe and the U.S. has the U.S. did so far should be very clear on the fact that Algeria is not more a country threatened by the Islamists or by chaos, but a country where citizens are quite mature, are making very clear political demand for change, and that they should support it.
I think
Amal
is right. I think Amal is right on this. Why should the West consider any change as a threat to the West? Any change now will be part of the West, of the global village. We share the same values. What the people in the streets of Algiers are calling for, what they have called in Tunisia and in Egypt and in Yemen and other Arab countries, is to enjoy the same freedoms which you enjoy in the West. And secondly, why do we create always that fallacy of the winner takes all? If you look at the end of Second World War, when Hitler fell in Germany or Mussolini in Italy, the West helped to create a democracy. How did he do it? They created some sort of democratic constitution plus proportional representation in terms of elections. If you do that in Algeria, in Tunisia, anywhere, no one party could have a majority. So stop that fallacy of thinking that the flood of Islamism is gone. I think that duality of between regime, totalitarian regime versus Islamism, or totalitarian regime versus helping the West and our country from terrorism is over. The sale date by is over. That is a card which is burnt again and again. We are in a new situation where you have all the society, all components of the society, left, right, center, Islamist, secularists, they all have shares in one thing: accountable regime, good governance, and we are part of the world. So please, Sarkozy and others, stop hiding behind the card of fighting terrorism and Islamism, and don't create enemies like you did in the past. When the Algerians rose against the French, you resisted their independence and you created a whole old generation disliking you. Don't create new enemies of the new generation who want to have freedom.
Well, just to interrupt there a moment, so France did react today. There was quite a cautious reaction from Algeria's former colonial power. France says Algeria should allow peaceful protests to go ahead. What do you think of their reaction so far? Saad?
Yes, I like it. And the Americans were more forthcoming when the Tunisian trouble started, when they said, we called on the Tunisian authorities, and they did the same to the Egyptians. With the Egyptians, they said, we should call on these governments or regimes to respect freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of the assembly. These are the fundamental rights to create any democracy. Make no mistake. They are totalitarian regimes. They are not different to the Soviet Union, to North Korea, and they are totalitarian. They are fascist regimes, and they should fall.
But I'm just pointing out, you did just criticise the West for their reaction so far. And now, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I think we haven't talked about a very important element of information, is that the coordination has called for a new demonstration on Saturday. And I think that's a very good sign. And of course, you will see that much more people will be in the demonstrations, that obviously much more policemen will be also on the streets. But that's a very, very, very dangerous game.
And just briefly, Amel, just very briefly, because we're running out of time, but do you think that the regime will be brought down in Algeria in the next few weeks?
I think they can go on with security arguments in any case. I mean, people are quite, again, mature about what they want and what they don't want, and they can't just solve the dead demands and pretend that nothing is going on in Algeria by putting 30,000 policemen on the streets.
All right, Amel Boubekeur in Algiers. I'll have to give you the last word there. We've run out of time. Thank you, Amel, and thank you to all of my guests this evening for being with us.